Good day, children. Welcome back to the video session. Live in such a way that if someone spoke badly of you, no one would believe it. I hope all of you will improvise on your characters each and every day and be a positive person and don't let anybody speak anything ill about you. Live your life in a manner that nobody can talk badly about you. And even if someone talks, the others should say that no, they are not that kind of a person. I hope you understood this thought and you will live accordingly. Today we are going to see the next poem in your textbook. It is the geography lesson written by Zulfikar Ghosh. I repeat the author's name, Zulfikar Ghosh. A brief note about the author, children. Zulfikar Ghosh was a novelist, a poet and an essayist born on 13th March in Seattle. Later, he became a citizen of US in the year 2004 and he has written books based on some realities, some harsh realities and so on. And the book called The Contradictions, which was published in the year 1966, explores the differences between Western and Eastern attitudes and the ways of life. Okay, so this is a brief note about the author. Through this poem, the poet reflects several things. He is trying to give us a clear picture of the city, and then he is talking about the logic of geography, and then about the narrow-mindedness of people. To tell you in a brief, this poet was once traveling in a flight or a jet plane, and while he was traveling, he happened to look at the city through the window, and then through the glass windows there, and he was able to have a clear picture about the boundaries and how the city looks as the jet reaches the higher altitudes. Okay, now let's go into the poem without any further delay and learn about the poet's experience. Okay, children, let me read the first 3 lines and then explain it. When the jet sprang into the sky, it was clear why the city had developed the way it had. Sprang. Please, if you have a notebook with you, write down the meaning of sprang. Sprang means flew. Okay. So now the poet starts with the scenario that he is in the plane and the flight had taken off into the sky. As it rose a little higher, he was able to see the city underneath him. He could see the streets, the buildings that he had already seen while on the streets or while he was in the city itself. Okay. And as the plane was rising high, it was getting clear to him that why the city had developed the way it has been. He could also understand the logic behind the development of that city. So the way we look when we travel on road is different, and the way and the scenario from a certain height is really different. So when you travel on the roads, that is when you travel on a two-wheeler or when you travel on a car and all that, you have a very clear image of the you have a very clear view of all the buildings. You know whether it is neat or whether it is untidy and all that. But as it grows, as the flight goes higher and higher, you can just see the buildings. You will not know whether it is a neat place or whether it is a untidy place and so on. That's what the poet says. He could understand the logic behind the development of the city. Okay. Now let me read the 4th line. Seeing it scaled 6 inches to the mile. So particularly in this line, he says that as you fly higher, the height between the airplane, that is the jet or the aeroplane, and the ground is also converted into its scale. It's proportionate, okay. It is proportionate, and so it is a scale 6 inches to the miles that the poet has given to the readers. And as he moves up, he can't exactly tell the height wherein he is, but he can always tell in proportion to what we can find. Generally, you can see these kind of proportions are given in the maps. If you refer to your atlas and all that, they would have given you this proportion, that is this area from the ground level to this altitude. You would have studied about the maps, you would have studied you would have studied about the topographical maps, or when you do atlas reference, you will see the height of the mountains, you will be learning about the sea levels and all that. For all this, these proportions are used, and that's why he says, seeing it scale 6 inches to the miles. The next line, there seemed an inevitability about what on ground had looked haphazard. So note down the meaning again, children. Inevitability means something which is unavoidable, okay, and haphazard means no plan, nothing is kept in order, okay, that is haphazard, no plan or no order. So here in these two lines, the poet says that when he looked at the city, which once seemed like a haphazard thing. I told you, when you look on the roads, when you travel in a two-wheeler or a car or an auto or a bus, it looked very haphazard. That is, you will find that it is not in proper order, or it is an unplanned thing, or the city is not very neat, or it is not very stylish, and so on. It is not in any particular fashion and all that. That's which seems that it is very inevitable. That means which is very unavoidable also. The logic that the city looks haphazard while he was residing there is clearly seen. Now it looks all logical as he moves up in the sky and looks at the city. He feels good about it. Now as he goes high, he is having another logic now. As he goes up, he can find the city very attractive. He can feel something good about the city, okay. And this last line is again a line which is repeated, when the jet sprang into the sky. The same line is repeated. The first line and the last line is repeated. So you can call it as a repetition. Understood, children? And also a refrain. Now let's go to the second stanza. When the jet reached 10,000 feet, it was clear why the country had cities where the rivers ran and why the valleys were populated. So these 4 lines, let me explain it to you. So here now the poet has risen above to a little more height, and the jet has reached 10,000 feet above the ground. So it was very clear to him now that why the countries were divided into cities and why it had rivers, and why the areas near the rivers, that is the places that are very close to the rivers, were very populated, and why the places near the valleys were populated. Can you guess, children, why the areas near the rivers and the valleys were in particularly populated? Yeah, because people generally choose a place where the soil is fertile, and so that they can do agriculture, the crops will grow very fine, and generally they can continue living there because there will be land fertility, they can get a lot of water also there, and that is the logic. And so the logic of geography was very clear, why people were always staying near the river area or the valley area, just because they want to have their livelihood very comfortable, and it would be easy for them to continue their livelihood. The logic of geography that land and water attracted man was clearly delineated. What is delineated? That is very clearly shown. Okay. When the jet reached 10,000 feet. So now again the poet says that the logic of geography that he had learnt, that is land and water, attracted man generally. Man has always been settling near the areas where there is availability of land and water. The logic of geography was now very clear to him, and when he reached about 10,000 feet high, he could see a larger view of the ground. He could see the country or the area that was divided into small cities, and it was being populated very thickly. Children, again here in the second stanza you can notice that the first and the last line are repetition, refrain. Okay. Now let's go to the next stanza. When the jet rose 6 miles high, it was clear the earth was round and that it had more sea than land. So now the jet rose very high. It was 6 miles high from the ground. Okay. So the poet says it had risen higher from the ground and it went higher and higher. Things were very clear to him that the earth was round in shape. You all would have noticed a globe. You all would have studied about the shape of the earth. So here again he says that the earth was round in shape. And he also could visualize that it has more sea than land. Children, we are very much aware of this fact, right? That the earth is made up of, that the earth is 70% of water. And if you had seen the image of planet Earth, you can see the image very well in your atlas, or you would have seen the globe model and all that, no? You would have done a lot of projects, and for Avishkar also you did a lot for history and geography and so on. So you know what is a globe and how it looks like. So when you look at the globe, you can very well recognize that the blue portion, that is the water portion, is more than the green or the brown portion. Brown generally refers to the hills, the mountains and so on. And greener portions, it is obviously the land. Okay. So this is what the poet has realized when the jet had risen 6 miles above the ground level. Okay. So I think you are clear with this part. Now let me go to the next part. But it was difficult to understand that the men on the earth found causes to hate each other, to build walls across cities and to kill from that height. It was not clear why. Now here, this is the end part of the poem. And so long the poet was talking about his journey, like in each height, that is in each altitude, how much he could see the city, and he was talking about the logic of geography and all that. Now his jet was going higher and higher. He could understand why the city, which once looked very haphazard, that is in the ground level it looked haphazard, but now as the jet went higher and higher, the city looked very planned. He could understand the logic of geography, that why people had been choosing lands near rivers which were very fertile. He could also understand that the earth was round and there was more water than land. But one thing he never understood, or which was very difficult for him to understand, was that why men on earth, that why people on earth had always found a reason to hate each other. Why men had built walls across the cities. See, these walls are not actually physical walls, but the walls that this poet is referring to, the boundaries or the territories of those particular states or countries. So these territories are secured and they are protected with the guards. What more he couldn't understand was that why men had reasons to kill each other. Why did they hate each other? Why are they creating so much of hatred? Why is there enmity among people and all that? So he had so many questions running in his mind. So from that height, he could understand other things. He could understand the logic of geography, as I said earlier, but he couldn't validate or he couldn't reason out why this happened in the lives of people. So he is trying to tell us that peace is required. People should forget their enmity. They should not develop the habit of hatred. As you go higher and higher, as you become matured in life, as you become a very refined person in your life, you should think about something very positive in your life always. See that you don't create hatred. You should be a responsible citizen. You should see that there is no enmity developed between yourself and others, and so on. So once we create enmity, then hatred will develop, then we will want to take revenge and so on. So it's better we plan our lives. Like as you grow higher and higher, how you can see the city very well planned. So as you grow matured day by day, see that you don't hate anyone, you develop a soft corner for anyone, be matured enough to handle things, and so on. So that's what the poet wants to say, and he finishes off with a little bit of question that he is not very sure why people hate each other and why they have to build boundaries. As I already mentioned, it is not the physical boundaries that he is talking. He is talking about the emotional boundaries here and why they have to develop such hatred and enmity among themselves. Children, now you can see a flash of the meanings, the words and the meanings. There are only 4 new words, so you can get to know the meanings of these words, and I want you to write your own sentence based on the meanings. You will frame sentences with the new words, that is on sprang, inevitability, haphazard and delineated. You will frame 2 sentences for each word. For sprang, 2 sentences. For inevitability, 2. Haphazard, 2. Delineated, 2. And you will send it to my mail ID that I had already sent in your WhatsApp group. Okay, this is your assignment for the day. Before we wind up, let me just recall about the poetic device that we learned today. The poetic device is refrain. That is, it is the repetition of a line in a stanza to create a rhyming or musical effect. As we already discussed when we did the stanza, the first stanza has a refrain, the first line and the last line, and then when you go to the second, again the first line and the last line. I hope now you have a clear picture of the refrain. Okay children, I hope you had a clear idea about the geography lesson poem and the new words and the poetic devices too. Okay children, catch you all up in another video session. Thank you. Have a nice day. Stay blessed and stay safe.